Hey there, geometers. In this video, we are going to be talking about a basic introduction to Chapter 7, including two really important justifications. The first justification or reason that we're going to use in our proofs moving forward is this idea that congruent triangles yields congruent corresponding parts. As we learned in Chapter 3, if shapes are congruent, that means they have the exact same shape and the exact same size. So if I know that these two triangles here are congruent, that is, if triangle ABC is congruent to triangle PQR, I know that all parts are congruent. So every corresponding part in triangle ABC is congruent to the corresponding part in triangle PQR. This is a really powerful tool because once I can prove triangles are congruent, then I can get a bunch of different facts that come from that conclusion. I will use this notation in my flowcharts to describe this. And that notation is read, congruent triangles yields congruent parts, meaning anytime the triangles are congruent, all of their parts must also be congruent. Okay, so we are going to take and apply that idea that congruent triangles yields congruent parts to these triangles here to show that SH is congruent to EP. So the first step is to determine if the triangles are congruent, and then if they are, I'm going to work from there to prove it. Take a minute and answer the poll question, by which reason are these triangles congruent? All right, let's see how you did. First, I'm going to list my first pair of sides, which is SA congruent to EA, and that is given. My second pair of sides is HA and PA. They are marked by the 2 tick marks, so I know those sides are congruent. And then the next piece of information that I need are these angles right here. Again, using my term 1 information, I would know that angle SAH is congruent to angle EAP because they are vertical angles. That gives me enough information to say that the triangles are congruent. And those triangles are congruent by side angle side. And then I want to show the facts that lead to that information to allow me to conclude that. Then I know these triangles are congruent. Well, if I know these triangles are congruent, then all parts of them must be congruent, including SH and EP, because those are a corresponding pair of parts. So from that, I can list SH is congruent to EP, and my reason would be congruent triangles yields congruent parts. Let's look at another pair of triangles here. In this case, I want to prove that segments AB and DB are congruent. So again, I'm going to look at these triangles and I'm going to say, can I show the triangles are congruent? And then from there, can I show that the congruent triangles have congruent parts? So again, take a minute and decide, how do you think we're going to show these triangles are congruent? All right, let's do it. So when I look at this one, the first thing that I notice is that EB is congruent to CB. That is given that I have one pair of sides congruent. The next piece of information I have is about these parallel lines. I have those arrows drawn on AE and CD, and that does not mean that they are congruent to each other. However, it does mean that they are parallel to each other. And then I'm going to use that parallel lines, and I'm going to draw a transversal to find some alternate interior angles that must be congruent. So from those parallel lines, I'm going to know that angle E is congruent to angle C. And my reasoning there is going to be alternate interior angles. Again, it flows from the information above it that leads to that conclusion there. So cleaning up my markings on my picture, it looks like I have a side and I have an angle. Now I can use my parallel lines if I want, and I can find another pair of alternate interior angles, or I can just choose to use the vertical angles here. Either one is fine. If I use vertical angles, I'd use angle, side, angle, and if I use these alternate interior angles, I would have 2 angles in a row, and then the side, so that would be angle, angle, side. I'm going to choose to go the vertical angles route. So I list my angles. Angle ABE is congruent to angle DBC, and my reason is vertical angles. And then from there, that's enough information to then tell me I have congruent triangles. So I'm going to go down here and label my triangle congruency statement. I'm going to say triangle ABE is congruent to triangle DBC. And I got that conclusion from this piece of information, this angle pair, and this side. And that was the angle side angle congruency theorem. Now, because the triangles are congruent, that means everything about them is the same. So I know all the sides are the same now. All the angles are the same. This is the last piece of information that I want to show, so I'm just going to add that down here. I'm going to say AB is congruent to DB. Why? Well, because the triangles are congruent. So I'm going to say congruent triangles yield congruent parts. Another property that I just wanted to briefly touch on that we're going to see more of is this reflexive property of equality. We've been working with it the past couple days, but the reflexive property of equality just states that the measure of any side or angle is equal to itself. So anytime you have a shared side or a shared angle and maybe overlapping triangles, we would say that those angles or sides would be congruent by the reflexive property. Let's take a look at the reflexive property in action. Again, I'm going to look for these two triangles. They want me to show that angle E is congruent to angle R. So my game plan is going to be first show the triangles are congruent, then show that the corresponding parts of these triangles are congruent. So again, take a minute, tell me why are these triangles congruent? And now let's show it. I'm going to start with my first pair of sides here. BE is congruent to BR, and that information is given. It is marked in the diagram. Then I'm going to look at the second pair of sides. EA is congruent to RA. Again, that is given. That is marked in the diagram. And then I see this shared side here, which leads me to say that BA is congruent to itself, and that would be the reflexive property. Again, when you think about that reflexive property, you can think about looking in the mirror. You're the same as yourself, so it's a reflection. But these three pieces of information allow me to say that the triangles are congruent. So I can say triangle BAR is congruent to triangle BAE by side, side, side congruence. And then, because I know the triangles are congruent, I know everything about them. All their corresponding parts must be congruent. So then I can say angle E is congruent to angle R, and my reason would be congruent triangles yields congruent parts. We will do more practice with this in class, but hopefully this was an overview for you to get you comfortable with it. Thanks for watching.